This week on Quality Digest Live, we found out how Pepsi managed quality across a complex global supply chain.
Plus, dumping the idea of management commitment. That more when we come back.
This episode of Quality Digest Live is sponsored by Olympus, specializing in easy-to-use micro-imaging and metrology systems that provide the measurement and images you need.
Welcome back to Quality Digest Live for February 20th, 2015. QDL is your weekly look at who and what is making the news in the world of quality. I'm Mike Richmond, publisher of Quality Digest.
And I'm Quality Digest Editor-in-Chief, Dirk Ducharme. So, another story from NIST this week. In an effort to help shoppers everywhere get the best value for their money, researchers at the National Institute of Standards and Technology, that's NIST, have produced, yet again, actually, if memory serves me right, a best practices guide for the layout and design of unit price labels. If you live in a state that has unit pricing, you know what I'm talking about. Usually you see them in supermarkets. As a matter of fact, that's almost always where you see them. It's the extra information that appears on the pricing label that shows you how much a product costs per ounce or sheet or count or pound or whatever. The problem is not all unit pricing labels are the same because the government doesn't. The states that have them, sometimes they'll use the label pricing guidelines from NIST. Sometimes they develop their own. So there's a lot of inconsistency. The information can vary from state to state or even store to store within a state. Worse, the information can be confusing or misleading, or I should say almost impossible to read. And actually sometimes this is done deliberately. If you're a cynic, you believe that. Actually, I've seen that. So, based on the results of a 2-year collaboration among industry and consumer groups, the new guide can help retailers and governments improve the accuracy and usability, that's the important bit, of unit pricing information offered in retail stores, according to NIST. It is hoped by NIST that it will ensure uniformity of unit pricing across participating retailers and states. So currently there's only about 13 states that implement some form of law or regulation that requires unit pricing. So it isn't ubiquitous across the United States, but they're trying to get there. I've looked at the guidelines, and to me, the best you can say about them is that if followed, the labels will at least be easier to read and at least consistent. But as a consumer, if you've used these things, you still have to beware. Really, the best bet, even when you've got unit pricing, is to read them really closely. Pay attention to the units being used for unit pricing. No matter how clear the label, stores and manufacturers can play games with you, even with the unit pricing labels. For instance, if the unit price for paper towels is, let's say, by the sheet, that really doesn't help if sheet sizes are different from one product to the other. And by the way, particularly in toilet paper and paper towels, this isn't unusual. The sheet sizes are different. So you can think, oh, I'm getting this deal. This is cheaper per sheet than the other brand. What makes more sense, let's say in that case, is square feet. Right. Now, obviously, I'm talking to technical people, so this all makes sense. But you can see where the confusion comes in for the average shopper. They're out there unit pricing. Oh, look at this. It's 5 cents cheaper than this other one, but sometimes the way they're pricing them is kind of bogus.
This is such an excellent thing for NIST to be doing. I mean, because it's really about the definition of what a unit is, right? I mean, it's very much.
And that's the thing. Even in their guidelines, they say pick units that make sense.
That's right.
And also be consistent in how you're using it.
Absolutely.
The best practices guide, by the way, was developed using the existing state mandatory unit pricing regulations, the Uniform Unit Pricing Regulation from NIST Handbook 130, and research surveys done by Consumer Reports and others in other countries. So it's pretty good. I would link out to it, take a look at it. It's useful only if it gets used, and that's the way these things work.
Like I said, I mean it's got to be used, but I mean for consumers, I think it's great again that NIST is doing this to help simplify what a unit is and to help people understand better what they're getting for their money, right? I mean we're all trying to get our best deals we can when we go shopping, so it's important to do that. Right. Thanks, Dirk. All right. Well, also in the news this week, it's report card time, and from the looks of things, your surgeon may need to stay after class. That's the message from a recent report in JAMA, the Journal of the American Medical Association, as quoted online by the Red Orbit website. The report cards in question are issued as part of an initiative known as the American College of Surgeons National Surgical Quality Improvement Program, better known as the ACS-NSQIP. I think that's how it is. They are intended to help participating hospitals zero in on areas in which they need to improve. However, in a study conducted by the University of Michigan, the program has led to no discernible improvement by the participating hospitals in the realm of surgical safety or cost for that matter. So neither safety nor cost are the report cards helping improve anything. Kind of scary. The Michigan study tracked 263 hospitals participating in the program and 526 similar medical facilities that were non-participants. This was a comprehensive study, really comprehensive, by the way, looking at surgical outcomes for 11 various procedures for more than 1 million seniors over the course of 10 years. So think about that. That's a survey.
A big survey.
Almost 1,000 hospitals, million seniors, 11 different procedures over 10 years. That is a big survey. Very valid results, I think. So the question is, why are report card hospitals failing to do better than their non-report card peers? Well, it isn't for a lack of data. The ACS-NSQIP report cards provide a lot of detail, carefully analyzing everything that these hospitals are doing, and then providing summary reports for doctors and administrators. The authors of the Michigan study indicate that it's the follow-up phase in which the problems occur. As vascular surgeon and study lead author Nicholas Osborne states, knowing where you perform poorly is the important first step, but the next leap from measuring outcomes to improving outcomes is much more difficult. Now, of course, that makes total sense, right?
Right.
It's clear that it's this leap that the ACS-NSQIP hospitals still have to make if they're going to get better results from the next series of reporting cards. And I think that's common for anybody who wants to take data and make it actionable, right? Accumulating the data is kind of the easy part, right? And from what we've understood here, these report cards are pretty comprehensive. They do a good job of digging into what hospitals are doing and what they could be doing better. But no one seems to be able to take that information at the final leg of the journey at the hospitals and use it for improvement.
I would say it's because there's no pressure to do so.
Probably.
There are hospital report cards or there are doctor report cards, but not a lot of people know where to go to actually find it. I think if you had patients actually making use of those and making decisions based on those, and then putting pressure on the doctors who weren't up or hospitals or whatever that weren't up to snuff, then you would see the postcards being used, the report cards being used.
Advocacy is always a big issue. Right? Who's pushing the envelope on that?
Exactly.
Absolutely.
All right. Okay, well, it doesn't take much imagination to think of the problems that come with a global supply chain. That is, when your suppliers and your subcontractors and so forth are scattered literally all over the world. So to protect your brand, every new supplier and vendor has to meet your quality and safety standards to make sure that your brand isn't damaged by an inferior product. And this is particularly true if you think about it in consumer goods, where the margins are so little and losing any fraction of your audience is really a major thing, right? Mm-hmm. The problem is that unless you have some sort of global supply chain management function in place, no single functional group owns the management of the processes that are required to create a finished product. And on top of that, data is often poorly shared among stakeholders if it's even shared at all. So our next guest is a man who has seen this firsthand. Ron Brown is the retired Chief Information Officer for Global R&D and the Global Nutrition Group at PepsiCo. So Ron, welcome to the show this morning.
Great to be here with you today.
Thanks, Ron. So what do you see as the single biggest problem for companies that have a global supply chain?
I think you can sum it in two words. It's ever-changing. Most companies continue to expand through acquisition or going into emerging markets, which creates huge challenges for them as they have to then start creating a new supply chain, if you wish, new suppliers that tend to be immature. The investments necessary to get them to the standard. They may meet the quality standards of your raw materials, but can they do it consistently? And also you have to look at the stability of the markets going forward. You enter some emerging markets today, and are they stable? So what kind of investments can you make as a company into that because of that instability? So I think it's the dynamics that are occurring that really create the largest risk for any global company today. And how do you manage through that volatility, as I see it?
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. Obviously, you're retired from Pepsi, CIO. Pepsi, huge company, obviously a huge supply chain. What problems did Pepsi face with their supply chain, and how did they address those issues?
You started earlier with some standards talking about NIST, but the reality is just getting supplier visibility creates a huge challenge. Who are our suppliers? What are they producing? Where are they producing from? It's down to the farm potentially, or where that market is going to. Is that data readily available? And the answer is, in fact, probably not in most situations. And when you look at the sheer number of suppliers, based on the fact that innovation is driving so much, the number of suppliers, unique suppliers, continues to grow, which creates another challenge for them going forward. I think PepsiCo faces that same challenge just like any other global company does, is it continues to expand logically. Every time you have an acquisition, you buy into those suppliers as well. You have a huge qualification process that has to take place on an ongoing basis. At the same time, you have economic pressures going on in any business today. Doesn't matter which one or how big. As a result of that, you're always looking to optimize your supply chain because there's a huge cost in that. So it's just so dynamic. And I think it becomes a challenge for any organization to really drive partnership in that. So there's real value in winning together and building those relationships on the longer term. And that's a challenge for any company, including PepsiCo.
Ron, a couple of minutes ago you mentioned risk in passing. I want to maybe redirect you on that a little bit because risk is it's a buzzword we've all been hearing about and talking about it. Certainly the new version of ISO 9001 is going to be addressing risk in a very specific way. Every company deals with risk, of course, and if you have a supply chain, you're dealing with risk multiplied many times, but especially, I would say, of course, for food and beverage. I mean, how does a company like Pepsi, for instance, deal with issues of risk when the product is one that people are going to be ingesting? What does that add to the program?
So risk can be defined in many different ways, one of which is, do you have a reliable source, if you wish? So you have to manage that risk, and that source goes to actually where it could be grown, or that country or with that geography. Is there risk associated with that? So any good supply chain is going to manage that risk and make sure they have options, if you wish, or alternatives, and start managing out of those risk areas potentially going forward. Throughout your supply chain, you are actually looking at quality at every point, and you're looking for that weakest point, if you wish, to ensure that the raw material being created or manufactured by a supplier meets the quality specification. Do you have a spec that's right? Are you doing the testing, just like you mentioned earlier, the same test, the same methodology in the same way? Is there validation throughout your supply chain? Is your conversion process being managed effectively? Unfortunately, in most businesses, they tend to be siloed applications or siloed information, and you need to make sure you can focus on the right thing to ensure that your supply chain is secure from the start all the way through to actually distribution or to the consumer itself. And so it's a very complex. It has to be looked at risk situations, as far as every product has a different risk profile, if you wish. So do you need to spend more time and emphasis on a higher risk raw material or a risk product? The answer is yes. Do you have kill steps throughout your process, especially in a manufacturing situation? Are there kill steps which are eliminating certain risks or pathogens, or whatever you may say? The answer should be yes. And are they being validated and consumed? So, I mean, it's a very complex question and an answer, if you wish, but it takes everyone across the supply chain to make it work, which is part of the challenge because no one function necessarily owns the total end-to-end supply chain. And they may own components of it, but holistically, a company has to look at it in totality to be successful.
Hey, Ron, in your article, you say that collaboration and accountability, especially accountability, I would say, is a key step to ensure the success when you're working on a global project like this. So we're talking about risk, particularly in food and beverage. When you say accountability, what do you mean by accountability?
Like in any project, it could be a quality project, it could be any initiative. At the end of the day, I believe in following a solid RACI. So there's a responsible, accountable, and there needs to be clearly understood what roles everyone needs to play. I think a lot of projects, particularly IT projects, tend to fail when the IT organization in any business takes on a responsibility that they really don't own at the end of the day, because they really are delivering a capability that needs to be aligned to a business process that is effective and in place, if you wish. And it's important that the business has clear ownership of those processes, the execution of those processes, the change management of those processes, or an IT solution that can actually support it to be effective. And I think that's the big difference that has to occur in many businesses today, is really establish who owns certain components. That partnership needs to be there so that you can win together. Unfortunately, many projects, be it on the business side or the IT side, fail because people take on the wrong accountabilities when at the end of the day they really don't own it, if you wish. The other thing that I see occurring, at least in my experience, is everyone has an opinion. Unfortunately, at the end of the day, who's accountable for it? And that person should have the opinion that matters necessarily. I mean, I may have an opinion on food quality or food process, but am I qualified? Do I own it at the end of the day? And the answer is probably no. I happen to be a consumer, so I may have an opinion, if you wish, but the quality department or the whatever organization needs to take accountability for what they own at the end of the day. And I think that's the important thing people need to understand, is establish that responsibility, the accountability, and the roles everyone needs to play in a project, in a partnership of a project to be effective and to execute effectively.
Okay. Well, Ron, thanks for joining us this morning. And actually, we're going to talk a lot more about this next Tuesday.
Next Tuesday, yes, the 24th.
At 11, we got a slide there at 11.
Yeah, 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. We'll have Ron joining Dirk right here to talk about managing product quality throughout the global supply chain. Again, that's Sparta Systems and Quality Digest next Tuesday at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern.
And Ron, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Okay, take care.
We'll see you Tuesday. Thanks, Ron. Yeah, make sure you check that out, by the way. If you'd like to register for that webinar, Ron's article is right below the player page, as usual, and you can link out to it from there. You'll also be watching your email, because we'll have a blast for you coming out again on Monday to show you how to register for that webinar.
There you go.
It's going to be a good one. Okay, well, it's time to dump management commitment by Steve Moore appeared in Wednesday's issue of Quality Digest Daily, and a good article. Steve Moore, good writer. We enjoy Steve Moore's stuff. He comments on a lot of our stuff on our webpage, and he also writes for us on occasion. So it's time to dump management commitment by Steve, of course. What? I mean, you think about that, you're like, come on, get rid of management commitment? This man, Steve Moore, must be a heretic. I mean, what is he talking about here? Everyone knows that management commitment is the core of anything that anybody ever dreamed up for any kind of improvement in any organization, anywhere, in any way, right?
There's a lot of any's in that sentence.
You know that. I mean, come on. I mean, I'm taking umbrage at this. Well, therein lies the problem. Everybody, every time, everywhere talks about management commitment, right? At the kickoff of any new improvement initiative, or really, for that matter, any initiative anywhere in the organization. Generally, I mean, it's not just improvement; it's safety, it's HR, it's marketing, sales. Any commitment, any initiative that the organization begins to start is going to be underlined by the idea that we need management commitment to do that, right? So everybody wants those managers. Well, it makes sense. I mean, if the managers aren't committed, and by the way, as an aside, Steve Moore points out that in his opinion, most managers should be committed. But be that as it may, it makes sense because managers need to be committed to that, and nothing's going to happen in the organization if top management doesn't get behind it. And managers play along, right? They show up at the kickoff meetings and they're all excited. They throw their weight and the support behind it. They talk a big game about how they're going to do all these things to support the initiative going forward and all the way home. But after a while, we know what happens. The shine kind of wears off that new bauble, and other emergencies come up, or other flavor of the month initiatives, or whatever it may be, and managers kind of take the first exit off the parkway, and sure enough, there's no longer any management commitment to it. I mean, the problem is that management commitment, I'm going to do the little quote marks here, management commitment doesn't mean anything because it means everything, right? I mean, something that means everything can mean nothing. If everybody in the organization says we've got to get management commitment, you're never going to really get management commitment, because management commitment kind of talks about a choice. You have to make a choice about what you're going to commit to. And if you're trying to commit to everything, you can't do it. W. Edwards Deming had a good suggestion here. Hit point number 7 in his 14 points. He said, when he talked about this idea, he said, Institute leadership. Very, very carefully selected, savvy advice. Institute leadership, because leadership is about leading people. Management is about managing things.
The key word there, I think, is institute.
Is institute, exactly.
Right.
I mean, again, as Steve Moore points out in his piece, Deming took care to script these two words in a very careful manner. Institute. I mean, the idea of an institution is it's going to be long lasting. It's going to always be there.
It's ingrained.
It's ingrained. Leadership, not management, leadership. And that's really a key thing here is the difference between what managers do and what leaders do. Leaders lead people. And that's what you really need to be doing. And the other thing here is that it's this idea of management commitment has become so, has kind of pervaded everything that we do. I mean, it's been in ISO, for instance. ISO 9001, 2008 talked about management commitment. Well, they're changing that now. Apparently in the 2015 version of ISO, they're looking at leadership commitment, which is better, I think. And Steve Moore agrees that's better than management commitment because it talks about leadership. But eventually we've got to transition away from this idea that managers have to commit to these things. They do, but you have to transition away from the idea that you're going to manage these processes and to the broader idea that you're going to institute leadership and your leaders are going to help to do the things that need to be done organically to make the organization better. That's a really key point.
I think kind of what I pick up from this is when you talk about management commitment or even leadership commitment, there's this idea that it's almost aside from the organization. We've got the organization and then we've got our leadership and our management. And I think when you use the word institute, it's like, no, it runs, it's ingrained throughout the entire organization. It's not this group of people or that group of people. It's all the people. It's the entire ethos of the organization. It's just part of what you do.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we always talk about combating silos. Management is a silo too,
yeah.
and I mean,
leadership's a silo in some ways. But some people become leaders.
Yeah, but leadership helps you break out of the silo better than management does.
Yeah. Management is that group of people.
Exactly. So eventually, you're going to hopefully get to the idea where you can, get out of that and look at it broadly and help the entire organization improve. That's what really the goal is here.
Yep.
Good stuff.
Okay, millennials.
Mm-hmm. Who are the millennials? I don't even know who they are.
I hate terms like this, like boomers and.
You're a boomer, right?
I'm a boomer.
I don't even know what.
I think you're a boomer too.
No, I think I'm like an X or a Y or some chromosome. I don't know what I am.
Okay, well, millennials. Those are the basically those are the guys and gals who came of age in the 2000s. That's kind of the definition. These are folks who have never used a corded phone. Like,
Children.
Or a floppy disk. Remember floppy disks?
No.
That's the whole problem.
I forgot. I don't have any memory anymore. I'm too old.
These folks grew up online, right? I mean, you can make fun of them, and obviously you do. Yeah. But the thing is that really millennials, they're tapped into and possibly more savvy about and more accepting of, and that's the key one, the more accepting of the digital world than old people. And that might just be useful to you old people, according to Jennifer Hart Yim, who looks like she's about 60 years old.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah.
In her article, how millennials are poised to change the supply chain industry.
Easy for you to say.
Not really. Yim suggested some areas where millennials can add a unique perspective. First of all, the Internet of Things. As we have pointed out, even though more and more products and devices are connected to the internet, many companies really haven't completely figured out how to use that information. And part of that is just because they're big and they're lumbersome and...
Lumbersome? That's a new word.
Lumbersome. Like
you just invented a word. That's a great word, lumbersome.
Lumbersome.
That's great.
They're like lumber.
Yeah.
They don't move very fast on their own.
That is awesome.
Thank you. Yim says that supply chain companies should tap millennials to leverage their unique perspective by engaging them in thinking about how to optimize their processes using IoT or Internet of Things devices. When you think about it, we tend to gravitate toward the tools that we're most familiar with, and that includes technology. So while boomers might understand IoT, they might not consider using it as a tool when compared to other more traditional information gathering or communication tools that they're more familiar with, right, and have experience with. So we might be missing out on some real opportunities on how to improve our supply chains. IoT is a natural for gathering that kind of information, and millennials are probably the most comfortable with it. Yim also throws big data in with IoT, because if you're collecting all that data, you also have to crunch it, right? And I think the best argument that Yim makes for tapping the perspective of our digital-minded youth is really in the area of marketing. And of course, this is something that we're very familiar with, because that's basically how we make our money. The group Millennials, have been targeted for advertisements from a much earlier age than their parents or their grandparents were. So Millennials, according to Lim, have been desensitized to overt branding messages. Now think about it. In many ways, we haven't come that far from the advertising practices and even ethos of 50s and 60s advertising. Think Mad Men if you watch that show. We really haven't come that far from that. We are still pretty blatant with our advertising. And Yim argues that that doesn't work with Millennials. I'm not so sure that's completely true, but I get what she's saying. Yim says that the digital youth respond more to organic marketing and sales approaches. In that vein, they, Millennials, seek to shift sales and marketing activities online to develop more meaningful, solutions-based relationships with buyers. And this is something that we talk a lot about here. Social media and online marketing have really blurred the lines between advertising and content. That used to be so taboo in our industry. I mean, those of us who have been in media for a long time, and even corporate advertising departments, know that there were lines you didn't cross. And not just because it was considered gauche to cross, that advertising editorial line, but also because readers pushed back. Readers and viewers didn't like it when you mixed advertising and content. Content was content, advertising was advertising. But if you think about it, today's younger connected readers want an integrated message. They want kind of the content and the advertising to support each other, even when part of that message is advertising. Part of offering solutions to buyers is at the moment when they are seeking a solution. And online marketing is perfect in that. You know when somebody is in an article or reading a blog or something related to a specific product. They're there because they want to read that topic. We've talked about this a lot. This is kind of one of the big drums that Ryan bangs on a lot, is that if you're already reading something about this particular topic and you know, because it's electronic, that somebody's reading about it, that's the perfect time to give them advertising based on that. And people aren't going to be incensed by it because it ties in. Obviously they're interested in this, and now you're giving them an ad which is interested in it. And Millennials, says Lynn, are much more accommodating with that. We know that older folk aren't, because that's been our experience. But the younger crowd, that's fine. As long as you're above board about it, as long as you're not being sly or sneaky about it, that this is obviously an advertisement. Yes, it's connected to the content, and it's related to the content, but it makes sense. All that said, I think Millennials are like everyone else. When you have a hammer, digital media in the sense, everything is a nail. We've witnessed that in our own industry, but I think I think in reality, as it has always been, where you get real value in any endeavor that involves a bunch of people is that you harness the innovation and the excitement of youth, kind of that no fear attitude, coupled with the hands-on experience of more seasoned folks.
That's right.
And together you're getting that balance that you really need.
Yeah, and it's pull, not push. I mean, that's the thing about online marketing, the whole idea of the hyperlink within an article that can link out to some place where somebody can buy something is beautiful. I mean, it's perfect if you think about it. I mean, they click on it or they don't, and they land on the page, they like it, they buy. They don't, they don't. I mean, there's no harm, no foul. It really has given the consumer, the user, a much greater freedom to find offers and things they want. It's given us as marketers much greater freedom to present those things. You want it? Great. Right. Not, no big deal. So interesting change and in the industry there.
Okay, well, we're coming up toward the end of our show, but before we close, we'd like to offer our thanks to this week's sponsor, Olympus. Discover another dimension in microimaging and metrology with test, measurement, inspection, and imaging instruments designed for high precision, quality control, and R&D. Olympus engineered solutions enhance quality and productivity in industrial markets around the world. For more information, click on the banner ad just below or to the right of this video screen.
That's right. Thanks, Dirk. All right. Well, finally this week, we want to take a few moments to share with you our thoughts on the passing of Quality Digest's founder, Don Dewar, who died on Monday at the age of 86. Don had an amazing life, really, filled with an extraordinary amount of success, accomplishments, recognition, everything. After a lengthy career with Boeing and Lockheed Aerospace, Don was the prime mover in bringing the quality circles movement from Japan to the United States in the early 1970s. He was the founder of the International Association of Quality Circles, later known as the Association for Quality and Participation, also known as the AQP. He also created our company, and the high value that he always placed on the teams, and teamwork is evident in how Quality Digest has been run during these past 35 years. Ours, as we talked about it many times, ours is a very flat organization. It always has been. And we get practically all of our ideas for improvement from those doing the work. Our finance manager, April Johnson, editors Taryn March, Laurel Tennis, and Ryan Day, and account manager, Christopher Martin. All of us, the QD team of today, as well as the hundreds of employees of this company down through the years, owe a huge debt of gratitude to Don Dewar, not only for hiring us, of course, but for bringing us into a company in which our voices could be heard and our talents brought to their best possible use. Thank you, boss. We love you, and we miss you. Godspeed. Well, thank you again for joining us here on Quality Digest Live, and we'll see you next week.